this is what y'all are here for. Y'all are here for Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. And Dr. Dyson will come up here for about 25, 30 minutes, wax poetically about the intersections of race, faith, hip hop, and justice. The overarching question that we're going to be talking about today is, why is it important for the contemporary inner city urban American church to embrace a ministry that exists at the intersections of race, faith, hip hop, and justice? I am switching gears now to introduce Michael Eric Dyson. And this is so important to me because this church and my own professional work would not exist if there was not a Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Completely. He was very influential when I was an undergraduate and graduate student. I read all of his work. Dr. Dyson is a cultural studies pioneer who changed the game of how we talk about race, how we talk about faith, how we talk about hip hop, how we talk about justice. But as a black man from inner city urban America, what Dyson did for me was to let me know it was okay to be unapologetically black in predominantly white space and be uncompromising in my work to make my community better. And I got that from Dr. Dyson. So this is way more important to me than just having a speaker. Dr. Michael Eric Dyson is the living embodiment and the essence and the ethos of what I want this church to be, because his thinking, his writing, and his experiences laid the groundwork for that. What you all know about Dr. Dyson: he's currently a professor of sociology at Georgetown University. He's also an ordained reverend in the Baptist Church. He's a cultural critic. He is a cultural icon. You can see him on things from MSNBC to Bill Maher to The Breakfast Club. He is that guy. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, somebody who's super important to me, I wouldn't be here without his thinking, writing, and experiences, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson.
Thank you very kindly, Dr. Glenn, for that very gracious introduction, for your generous spirit, your loving demeanor, your prophetic portfolio, and your commitment to the people in your community. That's what a church is supposed to do, and so often doesn't end up doing. And I was excited when the folk reached out to me. I said, this can't be real. Ain't nobody doing no church like this, where they're looking at race and faith and social justice and hip hop. Those things are all existing in conflict and in tension with each other often, and pitted against each other. But for somebody to bring them together and, meet him, he's so young and vibrant, handsome, tall, dark. Okay, dark. And good-looking guy. Very youthful, but a beautiful man. And then I met his sister masquerading as his mama, and I see where all that comes from. But what he is doing here is nothing short of miraculous, because this is how the church got together in the first place. The Quahal in the Hebrew, the ecclesia in the Greek, where the gathered body of God, in this case of Christ, splintered and fractured by so many artificial impediments and unnecessary obstacles that keep us from joining each other. And here we are on this Saturday night, thinking together about critical issues that constitute our own community's response to really necessary reflection on the heart and soul of what this nation is and what we as a people ought to be. And so this great honor is mine. Your pastor's a great man. I got to go do an interview with Nick Cannon tomorrow. I'm going to tell him about this church. Then I got to go do an interview with the Breakfast Club on Tuesday. I'm going to tell the Breakfast Club, get this man on. They be having these fake false prophets from the religious world, ain't doing nothing but repackaging right-wing fundamentalist theology in a hip-hop beat. If you put a clown in a suit, you still got a clown. I live in D.C., need I say more? Oh, but what an honor it is then to have this fellowship with him. It's like I've been knowing him all my life, right? It's like we've been brothers for a long time. So I'm honored to be here tonight. So I'm going to kick it off and say a few things, and then we'll sit down and let his brilliance and wisdom permeate this place. When I think about the way in which race and prophetic ministry and the quest for justice, and then ultimately what we do with hip-hop coexist, that names the intersections that are among the most vital intersections that exist in our culture today. Race is something we've been grappling with for a long time, but we don't really want to deal with it. I was just looking at a video the other day of a white man, British cat, and they were asking him about white privilege, and he says, I would rather not deal with that, because when we deal with whiteness, we have to deal with race, and if we deal with race, the ultimate response will be from white people who are challenged in their white privilege is to suggest the reason they have that privilege is because of IQ. And we don't want to go there with that ugly argument. A curious defense of the need to be race transcending by smuggling in white supremacist presuppositions that the IQ would reveal that black people are inferior. So when it comes to race, it is very difficult in this country for white brothers and sisters who have not been taught to think of themselves, as the late Toni Morrison said, raced, as possessing race, in the same way it's hard for men to think that they are gendered. Right? When we talk about gender, men think, oh yeah, the women's. You got one too, homie. Right? And so when it comes to race, it is critical to understand that racism presupposes the existence of race, precipitates its existence, because there are ideological formations that mandate the necessity of and a belief system that would lend credence to the notion that some people are inherently superior and others are inherently inferior. And we could go through and look at studies that have been done about the origin of these ideas, excellent books that would track the genesis and the development of these ideas. But what is especially heretical is that the church has absorbed them as well. And so, as Liston Pope, the great Yale dean, said many decades ago, that the most segregated hour in America is still 11 a.m. But even more so, we refuse to understand how race and whiteness and the construction of black and red and yellow and brown, that the religion of America has often not been God, but racial identity. And in many instances, whiteness, as we see now, has supplied the unifying fiction of American identity. A lot of folk get upset. They talk about identity politics. My God, Jiminy Cricket, why do we have to do it? Why do we have to talk about race so much? Can't we talk about baseball or tiddlywinks or crickets? Can we speak about the Trailblazers signing Melo? Why we got to talk about race? And Gore Vidal, the great thinker, said, we live in the United States of amnesia. And I would add that the theme song is supplied by Barbra Streisand. I know y'all stuck on Taylor Swift. Y'all don't know Barbara. For the old folk, they know Barbra Streisand. For the young people, you don't know. She was a singer. She is quite good. She sang the song of, is it Lieber and Stoller? Who wrote, "What's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. Memories like the corners of my mind." And so, race in America as a social construct. Now, y'all hear these terms. We bandy them about in colleges with highfalutin titles and got to pay a bunch of money. I'm giving it to you for free. And so we talk about race as a social construct. Race is not the product of heritability, genetic transmission of information, biological data imprinted on genes that are then transmitted to your progeny. That ain't how race works. Race is a fiction, Baldwin said, James, projected into the world that we use to articulate our ideas about who we are. So the society in which we live awaits the imprint of our input in order to determine the content of race. In other words, you ain't born with it. The society helps you make it up and gives you a sense of what that might be. And so when we start with race in America, we start with the fact that this bit of information about identity has now been used to bully whip and beat down on those who are black and brown and red and yellow and gay and lesbian and transgender and bisexual and those who are other, that they are caught in identity politics. Well, everybody got identity politics, but we're not all taught to think about the politics of our identities. And we are not all equally forced to do so. What it means to be white in America is often not even to know you possess race, not even to know that you are involved in a racial conversation, often without knowing it. But whiteness gets rendered as universal and therefore gets rendered invisible and therefore looks neutral. So when many white brothers and sisters say, hey, can't we just be American? They don't know we saying be white American the way I think America ought to be, that we've come to a consensus on, not knowing how whiteness has been smuggled into the contract. It's like somebody hijacked Jean-Jacques Rousseau and got involved in the social contract. Okay, that's a little bit abstract. I'm going to come closer to home. And so when we think about race in America and whiteness and then subsequently black and brown and red and yellow and every different order and race that we have generated, every fictional projection of race that we have given birth to, every ethnic identity that we have generated, it's often true that whiteness is something that can't be grappled with. The great philosopher Beyonce Knowles Carter, said that it has been said that racism is so American that when we challenge racism, it looks as if we're challenging America. And so the identification of, this is what I mean by the neutrality of whiteness. The default position of American identity is white. So you ain't got to argue for what already is presupposed to be your human position to begin with, the default position of your humanity. And so it's tough for folk to get involved with that. Oh my God, it's too much. We don't want to talk about it. I was debating Jordan Peterson in Canada. He's talking about postmodernism and stuff. And I said, you don't really know what postmodernism is. Are you talking about Jean-Jacques? Are you talking about Jacques Derrida with deconstruction? Are you talking about Michel Foucault with the insurrection of subjugated knowledges? What you be talking about? You don't know. You're just making it up. Postmodern is anything that the left thinks that is loosey-goosey and not disciplined by its deference to a critical form of rationality that can be proved empirically, that which can be falsified or verified through the senses, and get rid of any instinct or any intuition or the social production of knowledge and desire. In other words, he's just skeptical of anybody who ain't on his side thinking the way he thinks about it, and everything else is just postmodern and crazy. This is one privilege of whiteness, is to define things that you don't understand as something that is incomprehensible. Stephen Morris, better known as Stevie Wonder, said, when you believe in things you don't understand, then you suffer. Superstition ain't the way. Y'all remember that? Yeah. And so race is a big deal, and we see it playing out in our country. We see what's going on in the city in which I live now, just madness. And what's interesting is that this man beat up on the people who had the job before he did. He was horrible. He called him, he was a birther. He said the man wasn't even born here, didn't deserve to be called an American. Now we see who's really against America. You in bed with all kind of folk. Right? If the dude who had the job before you had it had a white Russian drink, better put his black ass out of office. You coming up in there with a real white Russian who's making all kind of extraneous gases, just be Putin. Come on, y'all. Come on now. Ain't no extra charge for these jokes now. Race is out of control. America is out of control. When it comes to race, used to think that black and brown people and women were the beneficiaries of affirmative action, which meant in their mind not what it really means. In the competition for scarce resources, scarcer and scarcer, or precious social goods, that the competition between two relatively equal candidates, the nod will go to the historically underrepresented minority group because we have systematically precluded them from participating in the larger circle of American privilege. Right? Now, how is that inferiority? How is that letting inferior people in? Do you know that recently, 3 years ago, the first black ball player for the NBA died? Think about that. He was alive 3 years ago. The first one to play professional basketball. That's inconceivable, ain't it? LeBron, Kobe, Jordan, right? Lillard, CJ, Melo. You mean there was a time when cats like that couldn't play? Were they inferior? Or were they not allowed to play because of the suspicion and fear of those who claimed to be superior? Maybe they knew they was lying all along. I know they were lying. Excuse me for the dip into the vernacular intensity of my own local poetry. So the thing is, are you telling me affirmative action, which says now black ball players must be allowed to play in the NBA, is letting inferior people in? Of course, some would say, well, everybody ain't Michael Jordan. All the white men ain't never been Jordan. They still got a job. Well, they used to. The white guys now, kind of rough in the NBA. Eastern European white boys got jobs. But American-born white men, tough. So I'm going to have to come up with the Larry Bird exception to let at least 5 white American men play basketball every year. Don't get scared. And so I was on a plane recently, and 2 white women, they'd seen me on TV. They knew me, Dr. Dyson, talking to me. And then the announcement of the pilot came on. It was a white woman. They said, Dr. Dyson, what do you think about that? I said, what do you mean? They said, you know. I said, oh, heck, I'm going to go to sleep now. I said, because if it's a woman flying this plane, they done tested that woman so deep, she could fly this joint upside down and land on a dime and give you 2 nickels. So that ain't what affirmative action means. It means giving qualified people who've been excluded the opportunity to participate. And then when we look on the white side of things, we go, now come on, y'all. You know it ain't been quality and competence that has determined access. I'm in Washington. The beautiful thing about this guy, he is almost single-handedly deconstructed white supremacy. You look at him and go, hot damn, it must be a lie. This man is unmolested by enlightenment. He don't read nothing. White people are even ashamed. Oh, my God. You're not Caucasian. You're lost Cajun. We don't know. He don't read. He don't study. He don't think. They give him prep books. He watching Fox News. And he thinks he's a genius, a stable genius. He stands up every morning to excrete the feces of his moral depravity into a nation he has turned into a psychic commode. Brave women whose families survived the Holocaust are appointed as ambassadors in the world, and he live tweets to intimidate them while they are giving voice. But lest you think he is an exception. Many white brothers and sisters look at him and say, that ain't a, we don't know where he came from. Oh, yeah, you do. Now, he real special. Let's just be honest about that. He is unto himself. But he came out of a womb of thought like that, of unconscious white privilege, of unconscious white bigotry. He got a white bigot and a white supremacist named Stephen Miller in his cabinet, basically, writing position papers on public policy. The womb of whiteness is where Donald Trump took his nurture. Donald Trump is what black folk have been warning white folk against for 400 years. We've been trying to tell you this what it looked like. Now many white people get, oh, now we see. What is white supremacy? Narcissistic? Self-important? Be lying? Just making stuff up. Do you know the Washington Post has done a study that said we have looked at this cat over the last almost 1,000 to 900 and some days. He done told over 13,500 lies. What kind of average is that? He just lying, getting up. Hi, good morning, lie. We're building a wall, lie. The Mexicans are going to pay for it, just damn lie. And so, when we think about race in America, it's not only whiteness, but the counterpublics, as your pastor was talking about, the spaces and places where people seek refuge and cooperation, and solidarity. And in those cubby holes, we too must confront some of the limitations that we impose. I was at a black church the other day, and this is where race jumps on into justice. Black woman in Cleveland said to me, she said, "You know you're going to hell." I said, "Well, I know 25 reasons why I should, but I'm curious, which one do you know?" I said, "Did Jesus tell you that this morning? Dyson's going to hell." She said, "You know what I'm talking about. You preached in the church that God created gay people." I said, "And you think I'm going to hell? You a polytheist. You think there's a God for straight people and one for gay? Either God created everybody, God ain't created nobody." That's just what it is, right? And all these people trying to make these heretical distinctions between I love the sinner but not the sin. Well, that's what they said against black people. Black people were cursed, right? I used to be in my house and in Detroit, and some of the religious people would come in, "You know, ham is cursed." I said, "Really? Pork is pretty bad, huh?" Of course, they talk about the Bible, right? Ham getting caught in the dirty, and as a result of that, getting cursed into blackness. And so I said, we're going to use the Bible the same way that the white supremacists have used it against black people, that within the context of our racial formation and communities, we're going to reflect the same ethic of adherence to ideas that are hurtful. We're going to do that? She said, "Well, they chose to be gay. I didn't choose to be black." I said, "I got news for you. Some people have opted out of the plan." I ain't going to name no names, Clarence, but I'm just saying. What? I meant Clarence Carter is one of my favorite singers. What do you mean? I ain't going to name no names, Ben. What? I mean, been there, done that. That's all I'm saying. Been there, done black. I said, if people choose to be gay, then when did you choose to be straight? I'm just going by your logic. So tell me, did you get up at 13? "Hey, Ma, I've been looking at these options. And I'm going to go the straight path. So I'm going to need a black book and a car so I can holler at these women." Is that how it works? Or do you live in a culture that teaches you what's right and wrong unconsciously, like it does with race? It gives you a sense of what and who you are. And you learn to like it or loathe it. Even if you happen to be gay, some of the most effective homophobes are themselves closeted gay, forced to stay in that closet because the culture in which we live doesn't accept them. Starting with the church. The church, not only in terms of race, but in terms of these issues of sexual orientation and justice, because justice is what love sounds like when it speaks in public. And so I said to her, I know it ain't no choice. Let me tell you why. That white senator from Iowa, who was against gay marriage, married to a woman with several kids, went into the bathroom stall, touched the toe of his neighbor, letting him know, "How you doing?" Now, I've done the same thing, but I was looking for toilet paper. I had no idea that was the sign. I was, "Oh, no, thanks. I'm good. I just need some toilet paper to finish off." I didn't know that was the sign. If anybody would stop it, why wouldn't he? If he could, quote, control it. Because we live in a culture where, again, we have been demonized from within, taught that the invisible escape hatch of the default sexual orientation is straight, and that's what's normal. So how we normalize a church that deals with race and justice. Justice especially, rendering what is justly due to the other to him or her. In a world where we see black men being locked up in disproportionate fashion, incarcerated for stuff that if white folk did, they got away with or ignored. Amnesty International did a study 25 some odd years ago. The same offenses for which young Johnny and Sally are tapped on the back of their hands, Shaniqua and Jamal are put in jail. Put in detention first. Detention's a warehouse, a feeder for jail. Jail becomes a warehouse for prison. And that school to prison pipeline is pretty predictable. You in school in a bad part of Portland, the one you don't see on TV, the nice commercials with Powell's books and clean living. When the first plane ride I took when I was 16 was from Detroit to Portland, Oregon for a Christian youth convention. And I said, man, this is a clean place. Portland, Oregon. 16 years old from Detroit, hours on a plane and got here to Portland. Before Nike, Beaverton, all the places, right, for which this area has been known. And when you think about justice, when you think about social justice, when you think about where people live and what we should be doing as the church, it is extremely important for us to understand that some people think that they have made it on their own, that they've done everything they're supposed to do, and why can't you do the same thing? Don't even recognize their privilege. As they say, born on third base and think you hit a triple. Or you could be the president's son and bought a whole bunch of your own books to get number one on the New York Times bestseller list. I'm going to remember that in a couple of weeks, but you know, when my book come out, I want y'all to go out there en masse. Demand 30,000 copies of Jay-Z. And so, if justice is what love sounds like when it speaks in public, we have to translate the private ethic of love into a public ethic of justice. That's what the church has got to do, because the politicians ain't doing it. You see these impeachment hearings, you see much of the stuff going on in the name of politics, left and right. Republican and Democrat. A lot of poor people ain't mentioned. They talk a lot about the middle class, and that's good. We want to be in the middle class and above. Rich people and above. But a lot of people don't talk about poor people. They are invisible, as Michael Harrington said, and they remain invisible. Proverbs says a rich man has a bunch of advocates, but nobody speaks for the poor. Those whose backs are against the wall, those who go to horrible public schools, those whose teachers may not care about them as much as they should, those who have classrooms that are overcrowded, those who don't have money to pay even for school lunches, those who don't have the ability to stand and defend themselves. And so race and faith, social justice are critical, and the faith component is especially critical because it's the believers who ought to be making a difference. I mean, if Jesus is in your heart, but nobody can feel you, it's not a very good representation of who Jesus is. I'm almost done. If Jesus is in your spirit, but you are cold to your neighbors, Jesus ain't got much to do with that. If Jesus is about how your theology tells you how to pray or be baptized as opposed to how to transform the world in which you live, Martin Luther King Jr. had to leave his segment of the black church, the Black Baptist Church, and they had to start another one like y'all doing here. Had to start the Progressive National Baptist Convention because the National Baptist Convention was illin', wasn't doing the right thing, was very conservative, was serving the status quo, wasn't challenging the powers that be. And so King was on the margin of the church. King believed that the church ought to determine what happened in the society for the good. But what is the church doing now? In bed with politicians who are trying to be xenophobic, don't want nobody coming in from Central and South America? How you think your parents and grandparents got up in here? How you think your wife got here? WAP meant without papers in part. Your grandmama didn't have no papers either. Ain't you seen The Godfather? Vito Corleone. Know y'all watch The Godfather. Don't tell me y'all know Scarface fan up in here. Go on now. Say hello to my little friend. That's what these young people stuck on. Go back to the classics. To Marlon Brando. Look how they massacred my boy. Why didn't you come to me first? This I will not forgive. In my house, where my wife sleeps and my children play with their toys. Okay, that was Michael. The Italian is a pimp. It was Barzini all along. Y'all got to learn these lyrics. And so, when we think about where we are in terms of the church making a difference, the church leveraging its authority in places where people have forgotten about God and the forsaken poor, those whose backs are against the wall, those who will never count, those who will never be seen as worthy of support. This is why the church must translate that. And Martin Luther King Jr. believed that the church should be a thermometer and not a thermostat. You ain't going to register the temperature, you got to change it. And then finally, hip-hop. Man, what has been a greater lingua franca in the world in the last 40 years? Now, there's a lot of great music out here. I love the blues. I love country music, too. Great stuff. I love some of them country boys and girls with the blues. They have those fancy lyrics signifying in the blues, if you're going to walk across my lawn, the least you could do is take off your shoes. Been down so long, down, look up to me. Hey, lady, your husband is cheating on us. And those beautiful country lyrics, man's talking about his wife cheating. She had a ring on her finger, but time on her hands. All my exes live in Texas. That's why I live in Tennessee. And my personal favorite, if I had killed you when I met you, I would have been out of jail by now. That's gangster country. And as I take my seat, see, the thing is that hip-hop was offensive to so many people because they didn't understand the offense to which hip-hop was responding. Mid-1970s, big booming sound systems from Jamaica and other Caribbean countries brought to America. DJ Kool Herc, they in New York playing them big old speakers out into the park, into the courtyard. And the DJ was king then. The MC was just an afterthought. The words were afterthoughts. Got to make you move your behind, because if you can't make somebody move their behind, they ain't going to listen to your words no how. They just happen to discover the words after the fact. The beat is knocking, the rhythm is deep. Then you hear what's going on. And so Ronald Reagan becomes president, 79 election, 1980, Bill Cosby, right? America's father and America's grandfather. Quite interesting from what we know now. And the people, I guess he put the Jell-O in the pudding pop. He was drugging us before he was drugging the rest of America. I don't make the news. And so here we are, grandfather, father of America, Ronald Reagan telling poor people that ketchup is a vegetable. And then hip-hop responds out of its own economic crisis, the economic crisis of poor young people. Budgets for instruments are drying up in school. They say, why don't kids play no instruments? Because they ain't got no school budget. It ain't like it used to be when I was a kid. You were in the band. They would rent me the clarinet, and I could play the clarinet. My brother played trumpet, right? We weren't Benny Goodman and Miles Davis, but we was all right. Now, when the budgets dry up, shortfall of cash, ain't nobody got no money to study instruments no more. Kids are led away from college prep to vocational schools. And as a result of that, they began to experiment with fixing the broken down turntables of their richer white students. But while they doing that, they start playing with the instruments and start fooling with the turntable. Because God will make something out of nothing. And so they playing with one turntable, starting that when the other one's playing. You put on earphone, and then you began to experiment. And then the first above ground rap song, 1979, well, a hip-hop, a hibbity, you don't stop rocking to the band, man. Then you got Curtis Blow, Those Are the Breaks. Then you got Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Broken glass everywhere. People don't care. Stare, you know, they just don't care. I can't take the smell. I can't take the noise. Tried to move out. I guess I got no choice. It's like a jungle sometimes. Makes me wonder how I keep from going under. That was the hit, right? And that, Nothing Like Jonah, until DMX came along. Y'all gonna make me lose my mind? That boy be barking prayers to God, don't he? Dear Lord. God better answer. God's scared of DMX. And so hip-hop develops out of black and brown cooperation, supplanting social chaos and disintegration in the public space as parks and recreation spaces began to shrink in post-industrial urban spaces in the inner city. So break dancing, b-boying, break boys dancing on the street, and break women, B-girls, B-boys, doing their dance as opposed to fighting each other. It was a socially reconstructive and redemptive way to engage the other. The music, the graffiti, the DJing, and the MCing. The MCing becomes dominant because black nomos, black logos, black word, brown logos, brown word becomes dominant. In a culture that doubts the intelligence of blackness, it is hyper-literate. Frederick Douglass said, literacy unfits a child for slavery. George Clinton said it this way, free your mind and your behind will follow. And I'm done, but the beauty of hip-hop is that it maps a view of the world that allows the suffering of the poor and the voice of the vulnerable to be heard. Now, we know it's more complicated than that, but there's a lot to be heard there, stuff you ain't listening to. I used to fuss when the landlord dissed us. No heat. Wondered why Christmas missed birthdays was the worst days. But now we sip champagne when we thirsty. Darn right I like the life I live because I went from positive to negative to positive, and it's all good. And if you don't know, but he also said back in the days our parents used to take care of us. Look at them now, they're even scared of us. Calling the state for help because they can't maintain, darn things done change. If I wasn't in the rap game, I'd probably have a key knee deep in the crack game because the streets is a short stop. Either you're slinging crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot. Dang, it's hard being young from the slums, eating 5-cent gums, not knowing where your meal's coming from. What happened to the summertime cookout? Every time I turn around, a brother's being took out. That's what the church has to address. The social pathology of diseased black and brown bodies that have been decimated by post-industrial, post-Fordist capitalist formations in America. You got to rise up and speak for them. Jay-Z said, "No, all my teachers couldn't reach me and my mama couldn't beat me hard enough to match the pain of my pop not seeing me. So with that disdain in my membrane, got on my pimp game, blank the world, my defense came. Tupac," I know y'all don't remember Pac. Not I Get Around, I know y'all remember that Pac. Much respect to those who break their neck to keep, yeah, y'all know that one. He also said, "Somebody wake me, I'm dreaming. I started as a seed, the semen, swimming upstream, planted in the womb while screaming. On the top was my pops, my mama hollering stop. From a single drop, this is what they got. Not to disrespect my people, but my papa was a loser. Only plan he had for mama was the blanker and abuser. And even as a seed, I could see his plan for me, stranded on welfare, another broken family." Right? And there's social critique there too, right? Yasin Bey, then known as Mos Def, the 20th anniversary of his Black on Both Sides. You can laugh and criticize Michael Jackson if you wanna. Woody Allen molested and married his stepdaughter. Same press kicking dirt on Michael's name show Woody and Soon at the playoff game holding hands. Now sit back and think about that. Would he get the same dap if his name was Woody Black? OJ acquitted by a jury of his peers. They've been messing with that brother for the last 20 years. Is it fair? Is it equal? Is it just? Is it right? Do we do the same thing if the defendant's face is white? White boys doing it well as success. I start doing it well as suspect. They say they want you successful, but then they make it stressful. You start keeping pace. They start changing up the tempo. His friend Talib Kweli said, "These cats drink champagne, toast death and pain, like slaves on a ship bragging about who got the flyest chain." Lauryn Hill said, "Even after all my logic and my theory, I add a cuss word so you ignorant fools hear me." Strategic intervention in the name of obscenity. I've practiced it a few times myself. As I conclude, so for me, hip-hop at its best, and don't judge it by its worst. Well, it's a lot of bad rap music. There's a lot of whack gospel music, too. Just because you converted don't mean you can sing. And stuff you be singing, Jesus will never say no. Stop lying. He told you no this much. May I? No. And so, at its best, this music reminds us of the struggle for intimate justice, for social justice, for cooperation with the universe that will help it conspire against invisibility so that its voice will ring across the horizon as the embodiment of the truth. And where it does not, the church can amplify the good intention and the critical insight that emerge from its quarters to uplift a society in need of its precious insight. So as the church addressing race and faith, the belief in God, but not the belief in your denomination, not a belief in your Bible, not a belief in your theology. Jesus was not a Christian. Mark Zuckerberg didn't have Facebook. Bill Gates didn't have a Microsoft computer. What do you believe in that produces that? Jesus didn't have no New Testament, had to have something deeper. The Word of God written in your heart. If God is still alive, God is still talking. And I believe in this church today, this Cultural Soul Project, the mighty voice of God speaks. And those who have ears must listen. God bless you so much.
Like I said, everything that you heard from Dr. Dyson laid the foundation and the groundwork for what we're trying to do for the church. One of the things I didn't tell you all, and I'm going to share some of this with Dr. Dyson and get his perspective on it, is there's 3 foundational pillars that guide the work of the church. So even though the overarching question for this evening is the importance for the contemporary inner city urban church to embrace a ministry that exists at the intersections of race, faith, hip hop, and justice, we have 3 major pillars that guides the work of the church. And you can read about it on the website, but the first one is the prophetic gospel of Christ. The second one is a critical theory on race. And the third is a critical hip hop theory. And as much as I love talking about a critical theory on race and critical hip hop theory, we have to talk about it under the umbrella of the prophetic gospel of Christ, because if we're not doing that work, I might as well just go work for Rock Nation. You know what I mean? So, Dr. Dyson, help me and help everybody understand this first major pillar that we call the prophetic gospel of Christ. Because in many ways, it exists because of your work. And so when we talk about the prophetic gospel of Christ, everybody, let me just give you a couple bullets of what we mean. When we say the Cultural Soul Project is about a prophetic gospel of Christ, that is providing a prophetic witness that speaks truth to power, that allows suffering to speak and to shape the agenda of those in power, centering the voices of people who have been shaped by life on the margin, what the Bible calls the least of these, and making their plight and predicament fundamental to and a central focus of the gospel, but also a prophetic context that speaks to the current and contemporary moment in terms of what it can and should be, as opposed to just allowing the current situation to dictate our responses to it. And then finally, it's about the transformative work of Jesus himself and using his teachings, preachings, and foundations to make our life better. So, Dr. Dyson, tell me, for a lot of people, I grew up with a Pentecostal background where it had a lot of good things going on that shaped me. But it also had some things that we pushed back against because we thought the Bible was just a rule book of what not to do so you could go to heaven.
That's right.
But now we're talking about the Bible being the impetus to look at folks who are vulnerable, who are look at folks who are on the margin and actually addressing those needs. So tell us from your work and your experience, why is it so important for us to center the voices of people on the margin, speak truth to power, and allow suffering to speak through the gospel of Christ?
No, it's just brilliantly said. I ain't got much to add to that. That is just perfectly expressed and brilliantly articulated. And if you take each of those dimensions, right, the centering of those who are on the margin, because sometimes you do your best notes in the margin anyway. I don't know about you, when you're writing in the margin, I know we got Nooks and Kindles and stuff. I still be reading books. Old school, I just want to smell the pages. Just want to hear them turn. I'm not a Luddite, but I do love the text, the papyrus, right? Paul said, bring me my books. So the marginalia and the marginal are often where the voice of God gets a shoehorn into the culture anyway. Because God is usually speaking on the margin because the center ain't representing, right? The stuff that makes it to the mainstream often doesn't reflect the true and passionate belief of who God is. I mean, think about Jesus, right? He's a marginal Jew. People think he's crazy, hanging out with 12 guys. They're all kind of strange. The guy who heralds his coming, a leather girdle, honey, locusts. What's up with that? That's not Wheaties. You're obsessed with a belief in God that motivates you to relieve the suffering of the poor, and the marginal voice of a displaced, alienated Jewish cat becomes the hinge on which the door of a religion swings. So the marginal voices are extremely important, because if we don't listen to those voices, we don't hear the hurt and the pain and the suffering that the gospel is supposed to respond to. If all you're hearing is testimonies of overcoming and celebration of how much wealth you got and how good the Lord has been to you and the prosperity, without also paying attention to the hurt, because the hurt and pain are where the ministry needs to address itself. You don't even know what your marching orders are until you've heard from the margin. And so, and it's not margin for margin's sake, it's those who have been forced to the periphery, pushed there by social dislocation, right? Extremely important. And the suffering of the masses, allowing that to speak, because what is religion ultimately about? Making suffering make sense, right? And sometimes it's absurd. You don't know. Why him? Why her? Why that? Why now? How much more can we bear? How unjust it is, how absurd it is. And you telling folk, well, in the by and by, it's going to be changed. You pacifying them, giving them what Marx called the opiate of the masses, right? Anesthetizing people. And when the suffering of the masses is not allowed to speak and be heard and set agendas, you predicate those agendas based upon the well, the healed, the powerful. I mean, you got folk in Washington, D.C., who they speaking for? Who are you talking about when you talk about health care? You are a group of 400 and some people in the House and 100 in the Senate, and all y'all got health care. Won't y'all do what everybody else does? Y'all don't have no health care till everybody gets some. Oh, they'll, in a quick and in a hurry, pass some legislation, right? They're telling folk what they can do. You don't need that, you multimillionaire. Half these people serving, maybe more than that, in Congress are rich, right? And so the hypocrisy is you're sitting there with health care, legislating for those who ain't got it, and telling them why they don't need it, right? And telling them why it's unrealistic what they want. Health care for all and Medicare for all and tax cuts for everybody and rebates and free college, while they're consuming so much of the wealth. Do you know a very small percentage of people control, 200 and some families? It might not even be that many, actually. Control over half the wealth in this country. And the rest of us dealing with the rest of it. That ain't right. And so the suffering of, the voice of the suffering to be heard, allowing the suffering to speak, to resonate, to fill our minds and inspire our spirits as we hear what is happening, the reports from the edge, the voices and the testimonies of those whose fragility and fracture and pain and vulnerability, right, resonate. So when Jesus rose up at the tomb of his friend, Jesus wept. He didn't condemn. He didn't judge. He didn't say you should have took better care of yourself. He didn't say, why don't you hang out with the people where it wasn't that hot or cold, right? He didn't make an environmental assessment of what led to this man's death. He wept. The shortest verse contains the deepest insight of the most ancient grief that has been amplified in biblical literature. Jesus wept. And we're judging, pointing fingers, beating up on folk. That's why the suffering of those has to be heard. And the church must amplify their voices, not that of the powerful, not that of the rich, not that of the privileged, not that of those who believe that they have made it on their own. We need folk who understand that the piercing, poignant predicament of their fallen humanity is that they must struggle to redeem the time in which they live with sacrifice and commitment to a greater force. And then, when we think about the justice agenda and why, this gospel has to be concerned with its prophetic moment. Prophecy don't mean you foretell nothing. We know that. Walter Brueggemann talked about the prophetic imagination. And he said, if you read the prophets, don't read them like giving weather reports. That ain't how he said it. That's a Dysonization. But he said, don't read it for history, and read it as poetry. And poets sometimes, exaggerate to tell the truth. Novelists sometimes make stuff up to make you see the real. Right? Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. Is your horse really thinking? But he's making us think. But I have miles to go and promises to go before I sleep, and promises to keep before I sleep, right? Miles to go before I sleep. And 2 roads diverging in the yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by. This is poetry. This is the poetry of God trying to make us imagine the hurt and suffering of the poor. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Hear the poetry of the prophets. And there were 2 kinds of prophets. There were central prophets and peripheral prophets. Now, the peripheral prophets stood from outside. What thus saith the Lord? Judge society from outside. We need that external pressure. And then there were central prophets who went inside. Martin Luther King Jr. speaking to Lyndon Baines Johnson. King could stand on the outside. I have a dream. And then he could go inside and talk to Lyndon Baines Johnson and say, we need a civil rights bill, a voting rights act, and in homage to King after he was murdered in 1968, the Fair Housing Act. So prophecy is inside-outside game. 3-pointer, baseline, right? And so we need that dynamic tension to redefine our capacity as Christians and the church to yield uplifting service to those whose backs are against the wall. What this church has, through its brilliant pastor, deigned to do, designed to do, is something that is the cutting edge of a radical faith that needs to be heard in these times.
Right on, Dr. Dyson. One of the things that, first of all, let me just tell you, I'm enjoying this right now. I'm like, yeah, I'm just somewhere else right now. But so one of the things that I have been saying kind of throughout the evening is how influential your work has been in kind of constructing my vision of what this work should look like. And I was doing a little bit of my homework, revisiting some of your writings, and found out that in 1987, your first published piece, when you were a second-year student at Princeton, I think that the article that you wrote was called Rap, Race, and Reality or something like that. His first ever published article was on hip-hop, and it was actually published in a Christian magazine, right? And for my theologians in the house, it was a Christian magazine founded by Reinhold Niebuhr.
Yes.
And so I want to know, like, even going back to 1987, what was the impetus for you to kind of foreshadow the intersections of what hip hop and what faith looks like, and bring that to the masses and connect it with race and justice and all those kind of things?
Yes, sir. No, that's a great point, man. You got a great memory there and understanding of what I've done. And, you know, they thought I was crazy, you know. Aren't you getting a PhD at Princeton?
That's right.
Right? Religion, ethics, and politics, right? Studying the great philosophers, and I did. Thinking about the great religious scholars, and I did. And thinkers, and I did, and I had a great time. But something else was pulling me, right? The tradition from the streets, those urban prophets, those pavement prophets.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Who are spitting that knowledge. Right? When Tupac says later after that, just the other day I got lynched by some crooked cops. And to this day, them same cops on the beat getting major pay.
That's right.
But when I get my check, they taking tax out, so we paying the cops to knock the blacks out. Now think about that. He's understanding how he's subsidizing his own oppression.
That's right.
You ain't got to be no Marxist economist to understand that.
Right.
And, you know, when Public Enemy, I know y'all don't remember Public Enemy, Chuck D and Flavor Flav, yeah, boy. Elvis was a hero the most, but he never meant to me straight up. Even though he's wrong about Elvis in that regard, I think Elvis had a far more complicated relationship to black people. Blank him and John Wayne. Already I'm hyped because I'm at. Most of my heroes don't appear on those stamps, right? They're bearing witness to a long lineage of suffering and agony and trauma and grief that black people have endured, urban enclaves of civic horror and terror called ghettos and slums, right? Allowing the suffering of the masses to speak, the marginal voices to be heard, the prophetic imagination, right, of these poets was a necessary redemption in the process of, you know, thinking about religion and culture. And I saw where I'm an ordained Baptist minister, have been for 40 years, and I love the church, but, you know, like Robert McAfee Brown, the great theologian, said, the church is like Noah's Ark. If it wasn't for the storm on the outside, you couldn't stand the stink on the inside. It's stanky in here, but it's a storm out there.
Yep.
And so, you know, William Augustus Jones, the great preacher, used to say when people come up to him and say, I would join a church, but they're hypocrites there. He's always say, there's room for one more. Come on in.
That's right.
So it was extremely important to see hip-hop as a vehicle for an engagement with religion more broadly drawn. Ligare is what the word comes from, to bind together.
That's right.
And those cohesive forces that drew people together that were expressed in hip-hop resembled a religious passion and fervor to me, and the relationship between a prophetic articulation and expression of a hip-hop artist and a congregation that listened to him in a cipher, you know, I said, man, there's something to this music, there's something to this culture, there's something to the expressions, and as you know, in 1987, 88, 86, 87, 88, when I'm writing, you know, the neo-nationalism is coming back. Malcolm X was making a comeback. You know, black consciousness was making a comeback. So much of the music had some of that political vibe
That's right.
and some of that Afrocentric expression.
Yeah.
And so I saw hip hop as as a harbinger of what was coming. I'll end by saying this. You know, I was at the conference, the Race Matters conference in 1994 at Princeton. I had just gotten my PhD in 93 and then became a full professor the next year. So what's interesting is that I used, in my talk there, Ralph Ellison and his conception of the blues and Snoop Dogg. You know,
In juxtaposition.
that's right. And of course, people thought I was like, what?
Yeah.
What are you doing? What? Wait, hey, what are you doing? You know, and Snoop of all people,
Yeah.
you're using him,
Yeah.
right? Falling back on that with the heckified gangster lean, getting funky on the mic like an old batch of collard greens. It's the capital O-S-O, yes, I'm fresh, and double O-P, D-O-double-G-Y-D-O-double-G-S-C, showing much flex when it's time to wreck a mic, pimping and glocking a grip, like my name is Dolomite. Yeah. The Dolomite movie is dope with Eddie Murphy. So what's interesting, and so, but he also said, woke up, jumped out my bed. I'm in a two-man cell with my homie, little half dead. Murder was the case that they gave me. Dear God, I wonder, can you save me? And you can hear what has been called that Calabama accent. When you heard Nipsey, you heard Louisiana and Los Angeles, right? I'm so gifted, so right. I'm the kind to go out and get it. No, you know, you can hear it. Snoop, you could trace the black migration through the voice patterns of these figures, right? Before in 1910, 80%, 90% of black people live in the South. Then they fanned out. You remember? New York Negroes Negroes from North Carolina went to New York, Alabama, and, you know, went to Detroit. So did Georgia. Mississippi is a suburb. You know, Chicago's a Mississippi suburb. Louisiana went over to Los Angeles. You know, I mean, there are differences, but I'm just saying bigger. The big differences, right? The big movements. And you can hear it in the Up South vernacular. You heard this in the wisdom tradition and folk tales and novelistic descriptions that are coming out of hip hop. And so I wanted to grapple with that. I wanted to write about that. And they thought I was crazy in 94. And somebody came up, I think a woman who went on to become a president of the university somebody said, see, this is the problem, you know, when you do this hip hop and you don't learn to discipline yourself and write about things that will lead to a fruitful career. Well, I done wrote 21 books so far, thank you, Jesus. You know, I'm a university professor, the highest there is at the school, so dang, I didn't get that on American Idol. So, you know, and I didn't get my degree my undergraduate degree until I didn't even start till I was 21. I was a teen father, you know, girl got pregnant, we got married. I was 18, she was 26. And I mean, what you want me to say? Anyway, of course, she told me 2 months later I should have never married you. I don't really love you. Holes in the wall, squirrels coming through, couldn't afford a bed, so we had a mattress on the floor. Thought my son was going to be born with trouble and problems because we didn't eat many days, hungry, homeless at some points. Got evicted on Christmas from an apartment. And I remember I had the Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison in my hands, man. Milkman Dead. I believe I can fly. Long before R. Kelly, sir. As problematic as he is. And he is problematic. But he's still a genius. But he's still problematic. Right? And so, you know, I went through that period of suffering and trial and testing. And I ain't forgot that.
That's right.
When I heard it ramified, reinforced and amplified in the voices of those young people. And so I wanted to write about it and grapple with it, and I knew that, this is the truth and the testimony of so many people that deserves to be heard. And your point about, the marginal voices. They weren't now a multi-billion-dollar industry. They were seen as epiphenomenal. It's going to pass. A little bit of time, you're going to be gone. Black people, turn that noise down, right? They used to have stations, I'm sure you were too young to remember, they would go, we play no heavy backbeats, only smooth R&B. I love R&B. Anita Baker, my homegirl, with all my heart, I love you, baby. I love that. Nancy Wilson, Ella Fitzgerald, I love Luther. Don't you remember? I told you I loved you, baby. Baby, 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 ooh, baby, baby. I love Luther. It's my man. I saw Luther 25 times. Yes, I did, dog. But there was something about the pathos, the suffering, the blues-like humor and resistance to social dislocation and invisibility that I heard in the Wu-Tang Clan, that I heard in Bahamadia, that I heard in MC Light. And so that and the beauty and the power of celebrating our uniqueness. So that's why I wrote about them, and that's why I insisted on writing about them. And I've since written a book on Tupac and collection of essays on Nas, and now this book on Jay, and another book or two on hip-hop. And written about it in most of my work. It's extremely important. It's central to how do we define ourselves, and it went from a marginal culture to now a dominant business model. I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman, so let me handle my business. All right. So it wasn't always there for those who jump on the bandwagon. Oh, it's so hyper-capitalist. It might be. It's obsessed with material. That's true. But a lot of that was a kind of aspirational, right, belief in the use of wealth. Now, they can be seduced like anybody else, and we got to challenge them. But at the same time, we know that Robert Smith went to Morehouse and dropped $40 million on them. Can't do it if you ain't got it, right? Jay said, I can't help the poor if I'm one of them, so I got rich and gave back. That's the win-win. Well, a lot of people don't give back. They don't remember. But King said we would rather have justice than charity, right? Because you might not feel like it one day giving, right? That's why Billie Holiday say, Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own. We ain't dependent on Mama and Daddy liking you or your girl. She might leave you. Your man, he might not dig you that day. I ain't dependent on you. I got my own, structural, independent of emotional change and variety. And so I saw in that music and in that culture something that I think continues to, 40 years later, to be an extremely powerful impression on the world that has changed global culture. They got hip-hop all over the world in their indigenous languages, people rapping in every language you ain't never heard of. Yo kids from the hood invented a genre that the world is duplicating. And we ain't got enough sense to study it on our own, to understand what God gave us when God gave us that. Our children who study it, produce it, manufacture it, and then also do things with it. That's what our obligation is as the church, is to grapple with that.
I want to say a couple things, y'all. Just stay with Dr. Dyson and I for a minute, because I want to stay on hip-hop for a second, because like I told you all, hip-hop is one of the major pillars of our church under the prophetic gospel of Christ and under our critical theory on race. And one of the things, or a couple things we say about hip-hop is hip-hop reflects the lived experiences, lived realities, and cultural sensibilities of those who have been shaped by life on the margins in inner-city urban America, right? It's a mouthful. But we're also concerned, very concerned as a church, with how people of color in inner city urban America formulate and negotiate their identity while simultaneously finding a sense of meaning, being, and purpose within various constructs of social and structural marginalization. So I want to, that's the Dyson influence in me. I want to put that up here for a second. And I want to talk about somebody, because I've never done this. I've talked about this person a lot, but I want to give homage to this person publicly. I want to talk about Nipsey Hussle for a second. So if you don't know who Nipsey Hussle is, he's a rapper who got murdered earlier this year. And I was really big on Nipsey. And I knew about Nipsey when he came up and earlier doing his Crenshaw stuff. But there was something about his album, Victory Lap, that I just thought was absolute genius in 2018. It was absolute genius. And here's a little bit of a story, and then I'm going to toss this to Dyson really quickly. So Nipsey Hussle's album, Victory Lap, came out in February of 2018. Raise your hand if you're a Nipsey Hussle fan. I want to know who I'm talking to up in here, okay? So Nipsey Hussle's album came out. You know how Apple Music, they drop at like 9 o'clock p.m. on a Thursday, but it's supposed to be a Friday or whatever because they're using the East Coast time. You know, for us here, it's 9 o'clock. But that weekend, 3 major things happened in my life, counting Nipsey, right? So number one, Nipsey's album dropped, Victory Lap, which I thought was one of the brilliant albums in the canon in the past decade. Another thing happened, Black Panther came out that weekend. Y'all don't, Black Panther came out that weekend. And I'm also a sneakerhead. So the black Jordan Cement 3s dropped that weekend, and I won them on the sneaker app, man. So it was like the perfect trifecta. And anybody that would listen to me, I know my kid's barber, he's somewhere in the house. I would always come to the barber shop, and I would always say, man, let's play this Nipsey up in here. Y'all got to hear this Nipsey. It's crazy. It's crazy. And ironically, I was a visiting faculty member at a college here, and I was teaching a class on critical hip-hop studies. And I was trying to put in relationship. I love Nipsey's song. I know as a pastor saying this, y'all gonna say, what? But I loved his song, Rap. I mean, I loved the whole album, but the first single off that album was Rap Ninjas, right? So we understand that. And the chorus was just, it was just sinister. I mean, the beat was sinister. I ain't nothing like you blanking rap, you know, hustle, man, a shooter, that's a, you know, right? And I remember every day I was driving to work at a predominantly white institution where I felt like I was just not like everybody else. And I told my class in an intellectual, metaphorical juxtaposition, when I look at these professors, I'm embodied at Nipsey Hussle ethos. I ain't nothing like you blanking right. You know what I'm saying? And everybody that would listen, man, but tell me, man,
I love that.
because you wrote a book on Pac, you wrote a book on Jay that's about to drop. We got it out here early. You wrote a book on Nas, looking at Illmatic. You wrote a book on Know What I Mean, Reflections on Hip Hop, where you were putting things in tension. It would be well, I'm not gonna put you on the spot because I would love to co-write a book with you on Nip. Yeah. But Neighborhood Nip, Young Nipsey the Great. But tell me, or tell the audience, man, and Dr. Dyson, he interviewed Nipsey. He met Nipsey. They sat next to each other on a first-class flight from coast to coast. So you got to know Nipsey a bit before everybody acted like they knew Nipsey after he died. Right. But just tell us, man, so I can just kind of heal how important Nipsey was to the game, man, and what he meant to the world.
No, I love that story, by the way. Because that's what we do. We go up in there sometime. We feel like Jay.
That's right.
Like Nas, all you haters.
Right. Right.
We feel, yeah, I see you, right. You know. If I shoot you, I'm brainless. If you shoot me, you famous.
What's the brother to do?
What? What I'm going to do, right. You know? And so, and the higher you get and the more hate you face, then you understand what these cats talking about. Nipsey Hussle was a special dude, though, man. You, everything you're feeling, you're right about. Right. Beautiful, intelligent. Well, he gets on the plane, and Walter Mosley, the writer, is on one side up there, Van Jones up there on the other. He slides in the seat next to me. He says, "Are you Michael Eric Dyson?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I read your books." I said, "Are you Nipsey Hussle?" He looked at me. He said, yes, sir. I said, and I pulled out my iPod, and I had that Victory Lap joint downloaded.
That's what's up. Victory Lap.
I'm so gifted. I was killing them, dog. And prolific. I'm the kind to go out and get it. No kidding. So he smiled, and we sat there, and I saw a recounting of him telling Ebro in the Morning, a radio show out in New York. And and one of the co-hosts says, when he said, yeah, I was on the plane next to Michael Eric Dyson, he says, yeah, I'm sure you didn't get any sleep on that plane. I was like, oh, really? Really, that's what you got for me, huh? I'm very introverted. If I don't know you. Sometimes I'm just chilling. Got my Dre beats on. What up? Listening to Andre Crouch. So, so he says, no, I was picking his brain the whole time he did. He's telling me about Abraham Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. He's kicking it about, social theories and thinking about the world. The dude was highly intelligent. And we going back and forth. He's telling me about his own drug, the whole days of the hustling and all that. And I got a brother then who was alive in prison, been there for 30 years, died in prison, we think for a murder he did not commit, but he was accused of it and convicted of it. By an all-black jury, they say black people don't send people to jail every day, right? It amazes me when white brothers and sisters ask, can you be objective about it? Think about it. White folk mostly do what white folk all day long. Can y'all be objective? Are you being racist? When there are only white candidates in there and you're voting for them, is that a racist thing, right? We have to think about these things. We have to flip the script on gender, sexual orientation, on race, on class. We got to think about that, right? And so we talked, and he was so amazingly intelligent. He wanted us to go out on tour. As people called me, we were going to go out on tour and have conversations like you and I are doing right now. We could have come here. All three of us could have chopped it up, right? And then I had him on my television show that we were putting together. Yes, sir, The Raw Word. And I insisted. I said, we got to have Nipsey Hussle. We got to have my man. He agreed. I texted him. We hooked it up. Beautiful, intelligent, entrepreneur, handling his business, trying to stave off the vicious effects of gentrification and buying up the hood. The very hamburger place that used to put them out, sell them a hamburger, but tell them don't hang out, or call the police on them for loitering, had to eventually pay him rent because he owned the strip. That's a you meant it for evil. God meant it for good. I'm Joseph. Put me in a pit, and I'll rise up and be the Secretary of Agriculture on your behind. So the thing is that you're right to feel him, man. He was a beautiful spirit. You would have dug him. He would have dug you. Man. He was a very giving and open and highly intellectual person, able to think critically, on his feet, and ahead of the game. He had, a guy working on tech that he met in the hood. Right. He had him working.
Like Vector.
Yes, yeah. Right. I mean, the guy was, his businesses. And I went there, of course, and paid homage to him afterward, took the picture, went to where he was, murdered. Man, it's like a crucifixion. Man. People jump on young people. Oh, you young people, you snowflakes, and all this, beating up on young people. These are epiphanies of the divine. These are revelations of another world breaking through, what Paul Tillich called the apos shages, the eternal silence of God shattered on the human plane by voices you never expect, right? Yeah. Voices of women. Yeah. Talking about voices that have been marginalized. But all through the Bible, women are the ones showing up, saving the day. You wouldn't even know about Jesus if it wasn't for no woman. Because the man was gone, like, yo, I have to check you later, bruh, because it's getting tight up in here. Like, I don't know you, right? Denial, betrayal, right? So, you think about the fact that those voices are critical. I was joking with people. I said, look, you can tell that wasn't no sister that Jesus met at the woman at the well either. When he came up, let me have a drink of water. And, of course, the woman was giving him the water, and they're talking. He didn't want to give her a theological disquisition on changing your life. Right. Then at some point he goes, where's your husband? He said, no, I ain't got one. He got 5. You know that wasn't no sister. Because when he asked her where your husband is, she just said, you tell me, you Jesus. Been waiting on the Negro for 25 years. The heck taking you so long? But anyway. So you got to you got to read the Bible through the prism of your existential condition. And so, you know, a Nipsey Hussle, to me, these are sacred, these are secular scriptures. Because who determined what got in the book and didn't? You think divine authority of God, right, alone, right? You think that doesn't come through human channels? You don't think about patriarchy and the belief in a certain male-dominant society? That's why Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza writes, in memory of her. Well, when we tell the story, in memory of her, remember with Jesus and the alabaster box and the oil on his feet washed by the hair of the woman? How are you wasting that? He said, when this story is told, in memory of her. So against the patriarchy, which would erase women, silence them, the first Me Too movement has to be against an ecclesiastical order that renders women persona non grata. Right? So, and the church practices ecclesiastical apartheid. 75% of many of our black churches are black women. They can cook, clean, and sew and do everything, but run the church, they numerically dominate. So when you talk about a prophetic challenge to these cultural practices, which really do not open up to the revelation of God, either when we say God is no respecter of persons, do we believe that? And a guy like Nipsey Hussle, to me, is part of a sacred, articulation, expression of the ordinary as the warehouse of the divine. The insight, the courage to tell the truth. Yeah. Tupac said, hell, believe in a white man's world, hell, have you ever seen a crack fiend? She's in hell. She ain't going there. She's already there, right? So when we think about eschatology, the things at the end, death, hell, judgment, the grave, they've already been realized, as C.H. Dodd said. It's right here, right now. And so a prophet, 33 years old when he dies, right? Gave up his blood and, and now embodies the hopes and aspirations of millions of young people who heard in him their most authentic register. That's a powerful thing. And what your church is doing again is so extremely important to have this opportunity to bring that to bear. The prophetic ministry, the faith tradition, race theory, and sophisticated race theory. Not just pointing the fingers at white people and stuff. Sophisticated race theory. And we got to point out whiteness, but as I did today, whiteness, the blindnesses within our own traditions, but also a more sophisticated and nuanced, complicated engagement with race, how it comes structurally, not just what you believe individually, so that when you get over your bigotry, structural inequality is still real. So you can be nice as you want to be, but the structure is still unequal, right? Still producing inequity. How do we challenge that? That kind of sophisticated race theory, and then with hip-hop knowledge being brought to bear, lyrically, intellectually, substantively, and musically, makes a big difference.
I want to close on a couple things. One is the third pillar I talked about that the church is a critical theory on race. And if you are a learned person, you probably maybe heard of critical race theory. And I particularly didn't say this is critical race theory, it's a critical theory on race, because we start our critique with race, but we don't end it there. And so I just wanted to tell everybody that we do have a critical theory on race. We look at the salience of race and how racism operates. We have a critique on the social construction of whiteness, but we don't end there. We have a critique on any socially constructed ideology that advances and protects its own interests at the expense of others. And I think the beautiful work that you've done is that around race, around gender, around sexuality, around a lot of things. And I think I just wanted to throw that out there. Lastly, this is just for fun and games, because I think we're at that point where we're about to get Dyson to sign some books. We're a little over. but this is just for me. I'm going to share mine. You're going to share yours first. And
No,
I'll
you
share-
go first. You go first.
Oh,
You go
man.
first. You go first, Doc.
So you can't talk about hip hop without ending with who's your fave five, who's your top five. So I'm going to tell you who my favorite five are, not who I think the best are, because y'all will argue with me on the best, but you can't argue with me on who my favorite are, right? So I'm not going to do that. So, and I would say in no particular order except for number one, Jay-Z, right? The credibility of anybody's hip-hop intellect, if you don't have Jay-Z at the top, I'm questioning your philosophy and your everything. Jay is a beast, man. So Jay, and I know nowadays y'all gonna not like this, but Kanye was a beast in those early albums,
there's no question.
man. Kanye
First
was
5, 6 albums.
man,
crazy,
he's a beast.
dog.
So,
Flashing.
man, Flashing Lights is fire with Dwayne Lake. So I'm gonna go Jay. I'm gonna go Ye. I gotta go Common. And I told them the story about Common, what you did back there, man, earlier. It's crazy. Black Thought.
Black Thought is a beast.
Man, Black Thought is
How about
crazy.
that freestyle?
Man, he's still killing them. And then I thought about this a lot because I know it's sometimes fashionable to say 3 Stacks, Andre 3000, which I love, man. But, all right, he's not my 5. So yeah, no. He may be 6 or 7. And I just got to go through the canon, man. I got to give it to Nas, man. Nas is a beast, man. Nas is a beast. So Jay, Ye, Common, Black Thought, and Nas.
It's only right that I was born to use mics.
Because the stuff that I write is even tougher than dice.
Taking rapping to a new plateau through rap slow.
My life is like a vitamin, hell without a capsule.
capsule. A smooth criminal on beat breaks.
But never put me in your box if your ish eats tape.
Tapes. I mean, that's,
I don't know, man. That's Nas Illmatic at his finest.
No doubt, my brother, no doubt.
So give me yours, man. Who are yours?
Let me see, man. I would say, of course, I just wrote a book on Jay. So Jay is definitely in that top 5. I gotta go Nas. Right. Just for the poetic inventiveness and still going.
Right.
I mean, Jay's still going. The Rolling Stones, AC/DC. I mean, still kicking it, man. Still doing it. And his favorites, right? You're saying the favorites.
The favorites.
I'm going to tell you somebody who slept on to me, man.
Who's that?
The Scarface.
Right.
Scarface is one of the coldest rhyme spitters and storytellers ever. And see, I'm trying not to, I've already duplicated 2 of
At
yours.
night I can't sleep. I toss and turn. Come mind playing tricks on me, man. That's like an all-time favorite.
Bruh.
Yeah.
So you've named, Black Thought is so great, Common, all those. Yeah. So since you've named them, I'm going to tell you, she had made another 2 albums. Lauren, dog. Lauren was a beast. Man.
Yeah.
Doc. Yeah. Lauren was a beast on these microphones. So Lauren, but if I had to, Ice Cube at his height.
Oh man, I don't think people remember that, man. Ice Cube he killed the game for a couple years, man.
First of all, you're writing for Eazy-E. How difficult is that? Right, you're writing for Eazy-E, and then you're doing F the Police coming straight from the underground. A young brother got it bad because I'm brown and not the other color. So police think they have the authority to kill a minority. F that, because I ain't the one for a punk blank with the badge and the gun to be beaten on and thrown in jail. We can go toe-to-toe in the middle of a cell, messing with me because I'm a teenager. With a little bit of gold in the pager, searching my car, looking for the product, thinking every ninja is selling narcotic. Man.
For y'all that was rocking with NWA, when Ice Cube dropped America's Most Wanted.
Man,
it I heard Paybacks. I'm going to stop right there. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to stop right there.
But let me tell you what. But let me tell you the other 2.
Who's that?
Pac. Pac is just,
I can't argue that.
did you see, I don't know if you saw the Breakfast Club the other day when T.I. had said that that he told somebody that Pac was even greater than Jay. And he said Jay called him up talking about somebody else and said, oh, by the way,
Right.
you really believe it? He said he's the Michael Jackson of hip hop in that sense, right? But what he did, the range. Somebody help me, tell me where to go from here, because even thugs cry, but do the Lord care? That's Martin Luther, right? Where might I find a gracious God? That's theodicy. Theos, God, dictates justice, trying to justify God's ways among human beings when God, whom you claim to be good and all-powerful, allows suffering to occur. I mean, that's what they're wrestling with. This is the existential anxiety and the bad faith, the mauvaise foi, as Jean-Paul Sartre talks about it, that they're grappling with, right? And Notorious B.I.G., I mean, just, only 2 albums, the double album, 3, but I mean.
And all the features he did, he was killing.
Oh, my God. I mean, was
that Total song or Biggie song?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or when the rim is in the system, that's him before it's Jay.
Yeah.
When the rim is in the system,
ain't no telling.
Well, I love him. That's what they be yelling.
I'm a pimp by blood, not relation.
Yeah. Y'all still chase some?
I'll replay some.
Whether skunk or tie.
Yeah.
But and then that was and that's a trio he did with Too Short and with Diddy. That was the coldest verse Diddy ever,
said.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So there's so many, but of the favorites, those, but the slept on Scarface, and like you said, Andre 3000. But let me tell you, Big Boy is a beast too, bro.
Yeah, he doesn't get the credit.
He doesn't get the credit he deserves, man. Outkast is the group.
Man,
yeah. It's the return of the gangster. Thanks to say y'all soft and y'all be gospel rapping, yet they steady clapping. When you talk about hoes and clothes and weed, is everybody with gold teeth down for the fall? No. Is everybody with dreads down for the cause? No.
Right.
They flipped it.
I got stopped in the mall the other day. Called, I came from the other way.
Oh, my God. It's just, it's so much, the density of ideal expression. Take the Wu-Clan, Ghostface Killer.
Yeah.
Starkey
Love, man.
Oh, my God. Even ODB, me and Mariah. But,
man.
The beauty of hip-hop,
right.
the variety of it. But those names at the top, man, and then I tell you, I know we're going way past, but
man, I'm good.
Snoop Dizzle is my, I'm a
I
Snoop
forgot
fan.
it was an audience out there for a second. But
Right,
I'm with
right.
you, man. Let me just keep going.
I'm with the Snoop Dogg, brother. I love that brother, man. It's something authentic about Snoop.
Right.
That's so powerful and representing that West Coast. When you first heard him with that baseball cap, that's before he had the hair.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 into the 4. Snoop Doggy Dogg and Dr. Dre is at the door, ready to make an entrance. So back on. You were like, who is that?
I want y'all to. Okay, so man, y'all got me in a whole different zone right now. But Snoop's. The Chronic changed rap.
Oh.
The Chronic changed hip hop.
Oh, my
the
God,
Chronic changed hip hop.
man.
And but I want y'all to go back though and check out a cat named DLC, because a lot of people don't know about DLC.
DLC was nasty.
He was,
bro.
and if you listen to Jay's public service announcement, he goes,
Right.
"I'm Hove, not DLC, but similar to them letters. No one can do it better." What was
I checked
DLC?
cheddar like a food inspector.
My
My
homie
homie
Strick
Strick told me, finish your breakfast.
Okay,
Man.
that's what I'm about. All right, anyway,
Let me
all
show
right,
you
y'all.
dudes
So check this
what I
out.
do to protect this. Shoot at your booze like movie
Directors.
It ain't a thing, dog.
Man, this ain't a game, man.
It ain't a game, dog.
I'm gonna tell y'all this right now.
Dum.
Man, allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Ho. Man,
H to the OV. I
Well,
used to move snowflakes by the OZ. Oh, man. Yeah, but I saw that. I saw that Watch the Throne with him and Kanye.
Yeah.
3 times.
Man.
Jay said to me when he said, man, we're going to give you a jacket or something for coming to so many. I was like, yeah, give it up.
Man, give it up.
I
saw Jay when he came in Portland on the 444 tour.
Oh,
and
my God.
Jay is a beast, man. His
Brother.
album,
Brother.
he's just really, really incredible. I want to say a couple things real fast, y'all. Stay with me. I'm not a Baptist preacher, but I still end 3 times like Dr. Dyson. I'll say this, though. I just want to go back to Ice Cube because you were talking about, this is important. This is important.
It is.
I want y'all to check out the album cover of Ice Cube's second album, Death Certificate. where he has Uncle Sam in the morgue with a toe tag.
Come
man.
on,
I mean,
Doc.
he's already had these scathing critiques on society.
Dude.
Let me tell you this. Not only am I excited about launching the Cultural Soul Project Church and trying to do work on the community for us, on behalf of us, this is a dream come true to be on the same stage as this man, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Beyond being brilliant, he's down to earth, he's cool, he's just one real good dude. This has made my day. This is one of the most important times of my professional and personal life. And ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Dr. Michael Eric Dyson.
Thank y'all.
He's a beast, man.
Thank you.
Y'all talk about these rappers as beasts. This is an intellectual beast right here.
Bless you, Doc.